Hello everyone, it's Brett here, Lionheart84, and something a little bit different today. You might wonder what this stricken looking plant is wrapped up here on my outside table. Now I'm filming this on the 5th of May, Sunday the 5th of May. It's going to be, I hope, the first part of a 2 or 3 part video, depending on whether or not I can keep this plant alive or not. So today I've been down to the South Sussex coast to pick up, would you believe, an avocado, a seedling avocado that's been growing outside in the ground. There's a very nice gentleman down there called Mike Guye, who doesn't at the moment seem to run a YouTube channel, but he does have a blog on permies.com, and he's experimenting with attempting to grow avocado seedlings, preferably hardy varieties, Mexican ones, bacon, fuerte, in ground outside on his allotment, and he's putting an awful lot of effort into doing this, including very heavy protection in winter because he's planted them in ground, and he builds shelters around them and then puts on several layers of fleece. I think the last time he told me it was 3 layers of fleece, but he's got some new Mexican seedlings coming on that he wants to put out on his allotment. So he decided that he would relocate a couple of his plants, and this is a bacon. The ones that he's got growing, I think he's got one large has which has been in for 5 or 6 years, and I think the 4 or 5 bacon seedlings that have been in for, I think, 3 years, and he wanted to make space for some of the others he's experimenting with, and he very kindly said he was going to offer 2 or 3 of the plants to people who are interested in having them, but they'd have to go and pick them up, and he kindly offered one to me. Now the biggest problem with this is obviously going to be, it's going to be a real challenge to keep it alive. It's been dug out of the ground today actually, and I've obviously had to drive down there. It's about a 150-mile round journey, so a reasonable amount of time involved, and we dug it out of the ground and wrapped the roots in the black polythene, as you can see, and the rest of the plant I've put in clear polythene, which I'm going to pull off now for you. Now obviously the root ball has been badly compromised in digging it up. It broke up and we lost a lot of the fine, particularly feeder roots. We didn't have to cut any roots on it, but avocados are notorious for suffering very bad shock from root disturbance, and that's when you pull them out of a pot. So to dig one out of the ground and transfer it is very challenging. It's lost probably 50% of its root ball. We've already cut off a fair bit of the plant. All of the growth at the top that was suffering from dieback has been cut off, and you can see that outside it was shooting out very heavily. The stem is very hefty at the base, well over 1 inch thick, because it's been in ground 3 years, and his protection has worked very well on them. Now the decision is, what do I do to try and keep this alive? I'm probably going to remove most of the leaves. I had the consideration that I could possibly find a position in my garden where I could put it in ground, which would be obviously the ideal thing to do, but then it would need very heavy protection in winter. Or I'm also considering whether or not I think I might try putting it in a container of some sort, because this will allow me to move the plants in winter into my summer house, for example, which would give it the extra protection from cold. Or it would be a lot easier to build a shelter around the plant in winter if it was in a container, because I could sort of move it into a corner and build kind of a framework around it and fleece that quite easily, because obviously the whole plan is to try and grow it outside. But my first challenge is going to be nursing it. Now I'm thinking that if I was to put it in a container now with an appropriate free draining soil, I can put it in the most sheltered, shaded part of my garden initially, and if need be I can obviously fit a cover over it to shade it even further and stop water loss. And I could cover it also with a polythene bag, and as long as it's in a shady part of the garden where there's no sun on it, it's not likely to overheat. I am in any case going to remove probably all of the leaves. You can see some of these have got a sort of a dark brownish tinge on, which may be cold damage. I think they're probably cold damage, or it might be partly sunburn as well, although we haven't had any really sunny weather yet. But basically the challenge initially is going to try and get it over the root shock and see what I can do with it. As I said, I'm going to have a little play around with it in a minute. I need to get it in the soil as soon as possible. Certainly I'm not going to use organic matter. It's going to be a largely mineral and aggregate mix, probably Johninus number 3 with some with perlite, extra sand, and that's probably about all I'll use to give it the best chance of the roots recovering. And it's going to need plenty of watering to get over the shock, but like all avocados, I've got to be careful not to overwater it. What I can't decide what to do at the moment is to put it into a fabric pot, which will give better aeration and drainage, or a plastic pot that will initially stop the roots losing too much water through transpiration. So it is a tricky challenge, and I'll obviously have a look at the pot size in a minute and see what my best option is. I'm just going to mix some suitable compost mix up for it now, because I want to make sure that it's in a mix that that allows me to water it heavily without holding on too much water if we get a lot of rain, because I've got to nurse the roots back to some kind of health. Otherwise there's no chance of the top half of the plant surviving. So I'm going to pause the video for the moment and then come back to it, and we'll see what I've decided to do. Okay, so I wanted to show everybody what I've ended up doing with this to see what happens. It's an experiment at the end of the day. I've planted the plant, as I said, into a plastic pot because I want the roots to have more humidity at the moment and retain more moisture. Obviously we don't want avocados to be sitting in wet soil, but I felt the fabric pot would be too open and too hard for me to maintain the correct watering on it. Now what I have done is the compost mix I've used comprises of mostly, it's Johninus 3, coarse sand, potting grit and perlite. I've added one portion of ericaceous compost and a little bit of slow release granular fertilizer, and it's very, very heavy. It's very heavy, and that's actually a good sign, because being very heavy, it probably means that it's got a lot of the right aggregates in it. Oh yeah, and I put some pumice in as well that I had a little bit left. So all of those things should allow aeration of the soil. Now there's a couple of interesting things on this plant that I know that some of the avocado enthusiastic growers over here would be interested in, and that was to show you the scarring that develops with time around the side shoots, and in particular this area here. If you'd bought a plant off a certain company over here that shall remain nameless for the time being, they would have sold this as a grafted tree, because you can see here this large scarred area. It really makes it look as if it's had some kind of graft put on there, but this is a seed grown plant that Mike grew from a seed himself, so that's simply a scarred area, probably where it got cold damaged in the first year of growth. Now what I've decided to do, Mike would like me very much to have taken about half the height of the plant off, but I kind of, as he's gone to the effort to grow it to this size over 3 years, I just couldn't bring myself to cut off half of that tree. In a way, I'd almost rather lose it rather than cut half the tree off, because it's such a lovely size. I mean, it's, including the pot, it's around 5 feet tall, and it's got a lovely straight strong stem the whole way up. However, what I have done is removed about probably 80% or more, 80 to 85% of the leaf coverage on it. Now that is going to leave me with an exposed stem, but as I'm going to put it in a very shady protected position, that's not going to be an issue because it's not going to get any sun on it at all. So I've removed a large percentage of the leaves, and the ones that I've left I've taken down to about a quarter of their size. As one whole one there, but all of the others I've cut down, virtually all the others, to about a quarter of the size they were, to cut down water loss through transpiration to an absolute minimum. It does, however, still leave it a little bit of green leaf to obviously hopefully photosynthesize and develop some energy. And I'm going to move it to its sheltered position in a minute, and I'm also going to cover it in polythene, in a polythene bag, to further reduce water loss. Now I'm not expecting to have any particular warm sunny weather for some time, and in any case it's going to be in a sheltered position. I'm actually going to put it underneath my chocolate vine behind the loquats, feijoas and persimmon trees. So that's on the north facing side of the garden, so it's going to be in a very, very sheltered position. Wind's not going to affect it because it's going to have a polythene bag over it. I will have to keep an eye on there not being too much condensation, because I don't want it to go mouldy, but I'm hoping that those jobs are going to help preserve the roots in it and further water loss on it. I'm expecting obviously to see some die back, but I'm hoping that it won't die all the way back, and I'm going to give it a really good watering in a minute with Seasol, which is obviously that very mild seaweed based water feed, because I think that's a very good medicine for roots. And if not a sickly plant, it's not sickly, but obviously the shock of transplant is going to be a major problem for it. But as you would do this with cuttings to stop water loss, I think that doing this to the leaves is the best chance of getting the water loss down to a sensible level. I can see signs of probably cold damage at the top of the stem here. You can see where it's been cut off. It was a little bit damaged in the middle, but the lower branches look fine. But obviously in later videos I'm praying that I'll be able to do follow-ups on this, so you'll be able to see if it recovers or not. So we'll catch up with you hopefully in the next part of the video. Okay, so it's part 3 of the video. I just want to show you what I've done. So the avocado is now well watered with Seasol, and I put a polythene bag over it. Obviously I'll have to watch if we get any very high winds coming, and that's now against my north facing fence, underneath the persimmons that are leafing out, and underneath the chocolate vine. Let's definitely set some fruits. Look, this is the white flowered one here. They're definitely growing, so we're going to get some, should be interesting, because these fruits should be a paler skins colour than on the regular purple ones. So it would be interesting to see what they turn out like. Now the only downside of this polythene bag is obviously it's going to prove the perfect breeding ground for snails and slugs, but I think it's the best way to keep this plant humid and hopefully reduce its stress. So we'll see what happens, but obviously in the next part of the video, which will come at a slightly later date, we'll find out if it's dying back or if it's still looking green and healthy, and if maybe even those shoots are starting to grow. So let's wait on the next part of the video, which will be on a different date. Very quick update on the avocado, 30-second update. This is 10 days after the first 3 parts of the video. and I've had it sort of in a shady position, covered in warm weather with the polythene just to stop transpiration. And now it's a little bit cooler again, and we've had some rain. I've left it uncovered. No bad deterioration. There is obviously some curling of these young growths and blackening of the leaf tips, because obviously the roots are heavily compromised. So at the moment it won't be putting any energy into these new shoots on it when I got it. It will hopefully, if it's going to survive, be putting a little bit of energy into the roots. No way of knowing, because I can't see underneath the soil, but hopefully this is going to be successful and it's going to recover. But I just thought I'd do a quick 1 minute update, and then we'll obviously carry on the next part of the video, by which time I hope it's getting better rather than worse. See you in the next part. Okay, next part of the video, just a quick update. It's now been, I'm filming this exactly 4 weeks after I got the plant. There appears to be no obvious deterioration and no obvious growth either. Whether or not these shoots at the tip have actually grown a bit, I'd have to look back at the earlier part of the video, but as I said, there doesn't seem to be any deterioration in the plant, no dieback on the tips, so this is looking quite promising, and I'm hoping that by the time I do the final part of the video, which will be in another 4 weeks time, we'll actually be seeing some decent growth on this, which will be an indication that the roots have indeed recovered. Still some buds here which I'm hoping might come out. Once they appear, then I know we're going to probably be okay. So I just thought I'd do a quick next update, and obviously I'll see how long it is before I do the next one, but probably about 4 weeks. Okay, so welcome back to part 6 of the video. This is being filmed on about the 5th of July, so 2 months after the first videos that I put out when I collected the plant, and things are, I believe, looking very promising. Whilst it's the plant's dropped obviously most of the little chopped leaves that I could off it, it did shed most of those. It now quite clearly is putting out new growth in areas that is looking fresh and healthy. Excuse me. And it's definitely new growth since the last video a month ago. Seems to be putting out shoots in a few places. This shoot down here is definitely growing. These new buds here are all coming out on these side stems. New shoots down here are growing, so I think it's fair to say that the roots are starting to recover. I'm very pleased and a little bit surprised on what's happening here. Now I'm going to move it away from its deeply shaded position into a lighter position, because I think it could do with a little bit more sun. I don't want the leaves to be so pale. Avocados are reasonably sun tolerant. Now it will have been getting a tiny bit of sunshine where it was standing, but obviously there is a risk of some leaf scorch on these young leaves, but I just feel it's too dark now because the persimmons have grown so much in the last month, and the chocolate vine, that the plant's virtually standing in the dark. And I really wanted to try and put out some growth. I'm not worried about it's very unlikely to get any burn on the stems. Now there are some shoots like this one that don't actually have any growth buds on them at all. This one at the top doesn't look as if it's going to shoot out. It's quite surprising. And some of these others as well don't have any buds lower down, so that one may not shoot out anymore, but further down the stem it looks likely excuse me, that buds progressing. So if you're still watching the video, Mike, I thought you might be pleased to see this last part. I won't need to carry on the series. This will be the last part of the video in the current series. Obviously I'll make a standalone video on the plant at a future date if it's still doing well in its pot, and it may eventually at a later stage, after it's well established, go into the ground. We'll see what happens, but I think I can safely say that it's got past the danger point now, in that this there's lots of new growth on it that actually looks quite healthy. I mean, that's put on basically, that's a good 4 or 5 inches now since in the last month, so we'll see what happens. Don't know how many years it would be before one of these flowered, if I could keep it alive over winter. I still don't know whether I'm going to put it in the summer house. It would depend on space, or whether or not I make an enclosure around it outside to keep the water off the roots so it doesn't get too soggy in winter. But it seems to like the the compost or soil mix that it's in at the moment. I was hoping to replicate roughly the ground soil that it was in down on the Sussex coast. But I hope you've enjoyed the video and stuck with it to see what happens at the end. As I said, I think it's a 6-part video in total. If you have watched all of it, thanks very much. I really appreciate you watching. Thanks again, Mike. If anybody watching would like to give me a thumbs up or share the video with anybody who might be interested, I would be delighted. Please subscribe to my channel, of course, and remember to click on the bell if you want to get updates on new videos when they come out, which will eventually include updates, of course, on this avocado if it carries on progressing. I will see you all in my next video. Brett out for now.